Hello, in this video I'm going to be covering common argument forms with unstated premises. And in fact, we're going to be restricting our attention to only three of the common valid argument forms, namely Modus Ponens, Modus Tollens, and chain argument, which I've written up on the board already, and I'm using the abbreviation MP for Modus Ponens, MT for Modus Tollens, and CA for chain argument. As you might recall from Chapter 2, by definition, any deductive argument with an unstated premise is valid. And of course, truth functional arguments are all deductive. So clearly the invalid forms are out of play when we're talking about truth functional arguments with unstated premises. Technically speaking, disjunctive argument and constructive dilemma could be in play. However, they just don't occur very commonly in ordinary everyday reasoning with unstated premises, so I haven't been able to find many examples of them, so our attention is restricted to Modus Ponens, Modus Tollens, and chain argument. I'm going to be working on several problems from 3-10 with you, starting with number 3, which has to do with the Sherpas, one of the cultural groups indigenous to the most mountainous regions of Nepal and the Himalayas. This says, although forbidden by their religion to slaughter animals, the Sherpas are very fond of smoked yak meat, and so they import butchers from Tibet for the slaughtering. I notice the conclusion introducer so, and I'm not going to do anything with that information right now except kind of tuck it in the back of my head and go back to the stated premise to start my variable assignment. The word although is indicating a logical structure, which means it will not be part of the sentence that my first variable stands for. That variable will come from forbidden by their religion to slaughter animals. Now I need to make that a complete sentence. Here's a way I could do that. I'm letting P stand for the Sherpas are forbidden by their religion to slaughter animals. Let me move then to Q after the comma. The Sherpas are very fond of smoked yak meat. The stated premise then is although P, Q. Although, remember, is a contrast word, and contrast words and phrases, when they indicate any logical relationship at all, indicate conjunction, which we represent with the ampersand. So for the stated premise, we will have P ampersand Q. Surely let me leave a little more room for writing. From the conclusion, I'm going to get one more variable assignment. I'm going to let R stand for they import butchers from Tibet for the slaughtering. So one premise is P ampersand Q, that's the stated premise. R is the conclusion. Now if we look at these forms, there's no way in the world we could be looking at an example of chain argument with an unstated premise. We'd already have to have two conditionals and we have none. There's no way in the world we could be looking at an example of Modus Tollens because, well, even if you just look at the conclusion, in Modus Tollens the conclusion must be a negation. And the conclusion here is not a negation. What about Modus Ponens? Sure, we can easily understand this as Modus Ponens and form the unstated premise in the following way. Just take the stated premise to be the antecedent of the conditional, and then take the conclusion you see to be the consequent of the conditional premise. And that's the form in Modus Ponens. Again, One premise is a conditional, another premise is the antecedent of the conditional, and the conclusion is the consequent of the conditional. So we would need to understand number one as an example of modus ponens. Let me turn now to number 6. Number 6 says, Judge Matola said the court was unable to find that Vanessa Rehnquist's murder had been premeditated and could therefore not sentence self-confessed wife killer Claude Rehnquist to life in jail. Okay, first off, we need to remember to edit out argument attribution material. The reference to the judge here is telling us whose argument is being presented. It's not part of the argument, so it should not occur in what any of our variable assignments are. The first premise comes from Vanessa Rehnquist's murder, or the court was unable to find that Vanessa Rehnquist's murder had been premeditated. Let's let P stand for the affirmative. The court was able to find that Vanessa Rehnquist's murder had been premeditated. And then the second variable we'll get from the conclusion. The court could sentence, we're using the affirmative here, the court could sentence her husband Claude to life in jail. The stated premise then would be the negation of P, and the conclusion is the negation of Q. So you see we have now negations for both the stated premise and for the conclusion. And that fits the modus tollens pattern nicely. You see in the modus tollens pattern, the conclusion and one of the premises are both negations. We just have to be careful now about how to form the unstated conditional premise. Drop the negation sign from the conclusion and put the conclusion before the arrow. Drop the negation sign from the other premise and put that premise after the arrow. And that would be modus tollens. Now, when I was in graduate school, one of my professors used to use the sexist saying, one man's modus tollens is another man's modus ponens. We could say one person's modus tollens is another person's modus ponens. And yes, we can understand this as modus ponens equally well. If we do, we just take the stated premise, which in this case is a negation sign P, put it before the arrow, and we take the conclusion, which in this case is negation sign Q, and put it after the arrow in our conditional premise. And this interpretation of number 6 as modus ponens is perfectly fine. Okay? Let's go to number 14 here. Former NBA player Dennis Rodman says the following: wherever there's money, there's drugs. So to say drugs don't exist in the NBA would be stupid. So, of course, is Rodman's conclusion introducer. Let's pick up a couple of variables from his stated premise, which is wherever there's money, there's drugs. He's then going on to apply this general principle, wherever there's money, there's drugs, to the NBA. And remember, in truth functional logic, when a general principle is applied to a specific case within one argument, we need to understand the general principle in terms of the specific case. So I'm going to let one variable stand for there's money in the NBA and a second for there's drugs in the NBA. Dennis Rodman is using the word wherever like the word if. That is to introduce the antecedent of a conditional. So he's saying if there's money in the NBA, then there's got to be drugs in the NBA. And his conclusion, of course, the way he puts it is, to say drugs don't exist in the NBA would be stupid. Well, in terms of our variable assignments, that's just Q. Oh, what we're looking at conforms very, very closely to Modus Ponens. Just add the unstated premise P. There's money in the NBA, and this is Modus Ponens. Now, what's unusual about this particular example of Modus Ponens with an unstated premise is that usually Modus Ponens when Modus Ponens is used with an unstated premise, it's the conditional premise that's left unstated. Rodman, in this example, stated the conditional premise and left unstated the non-conditional premise, there's money in the NBA. I just wanted to point out that that's a possibility. Let's go now to number 15. This is from a book written by an American woman who went to Africa to observe elephants. And the speaker in this passage is a man named Joe Farunga, who lives with his wife in a rural area of Zimbabwe. The author had gone to the Farunga's house for dinner, for which they've prepared a chicken stew. Meat is in very short supply where they live, so this is a real treat. And the author has thanked them profusely for killing a chicken for this occasion. And the quote is Mr. Farunga's reply to her expression of gratitude. He says, "We love it when guests come, for then we eat meat." The word for, remember, when it introduces part of an argument, introduces a premise, and the word for only introduces a premise after a conclusion has already been stated. So Mr. Farunga's conclusion is, we love it when guests come. We could get two variables from that, and then another from the stated premise for then we eat meat. The PB, we love it when guests come. Or I'm sorry, just we love it. Well, no, that doesn't sound so good. How about start with guests come. Q, we love it. I'm switching the order so that now the referent of the pronoun it is clear. And then from the premise, stated premise, I'll pick up another variable assignment. Namely, R equals we eat meat. Starting with the stated premise, he said, then we eat meat. Well, his premise is only partially stated here, not completely stated. Clearly, it's a conditional premise. Then is introducing the consequent. So we need to ask ourselves, when do they eat meat? Well, they eat meat when guests come. So when guests come, we eat meat. Remember that the word when works like the word if in terms of its logic. It introduces the antecedent of a conditional. Let's go down to Mr. Farunga's conclusion. We love it when guests come. Well, when, again, introducing the antecedent, when guests come, and the consequent is we love it. Now you see we are looking at an example of chain argument. Both the stated premise and the conclusion are conditionals. So our unstated premise also is going to be a conditional. Get the antecedent of the unstated conditional premise from the consequent of the other premise, in this case that's R. Get the consequent of the unstated conditional premise from the consequent of the conclusion, in this case that's Q. Mr. Farunga's unstated premise is, in other words, when we eat meat, we love it. Okay, I hope that this has been helpful for you, and I'll talk to you later. Take care for now. Bye bye.